the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics with Ghost. It's Friday afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, not 3 o'clock. We are going to start doing the show at 2 moving forward. And the reason being so we can spend more time digging into these news stories without stepping on Maha News toes. So thank you for being here. I am Gordon McCormick, a.k.a. the Ghost of Base Patrick Henry. And we are going to spend some time today just digging into some of the higher scale, big picture geopolitical narratives and picking them apart. Last week had my daughter's birthday I had to get ready for, so I pre-recorded the show, and it was a shorter show. We went through the Sudan-Russia narrative and how it's unfolded since 2017, but primarily since 2022. And I kind of explained how I used it as a vehicle to explain how I analyze these stories in general, not just geopolitics, but I think all political news narratives, to try to parse out through pattern recognition, earnest actors versus dishonest actors. And that's kind of probably the best way to frame it, rather than saying, white hats, black hats, or good guys, bad guys, because how can you really know who is acting with certain intentions? It's really more about who is being honest with you and acting in earnest, and actually doing what they say they're doing. Whether what they say they're doing is moral and righteous is a separate discussion. But if they're telling you exactly what they're actually doing, then there's something to be said about that. And I feel like that's a really healthy way to kind of look at a lot of this stuff, because if you only go around looking for good guys, you're not going to probably find very many. Or I should say, maybe you'll be more disappointed. You'll be disappointed more often than you will be happy. And it's worth mentioning. It's also how, like the news, like the MSM, tries to catch you. That's how they try to trip us all up, is they try to create these litmus tests for characters where you have to be perfect in every way. And if you have one character flaw, as every person does, every human does, if you're human, basically, they tear you down, and they use that as a reason to destroy you when it's convenient for them. And they leverage that in order to get people to act certain ways. So I don't really like those those purity tests. I like to look at it through pattern recognition as to, are they responding to events honestly, or are they responding to events dishonestly? Are they taking fake narratives that I know are false, and forwarding them for their own personal gain? And of course, Donald Trump sometimes does do that, but I think he's doing it as a War ninja, so to speak, rather than a dishonest actor. So anyway, I digress. Today is actually April 18th, and I thought it actually made sense I had somebody reach out, or somebody mentioned earlier this week, whether I was going to address Lexington and Concord, the first battle of the American Revolution. And while it's not exactly geopolitical, it is actually geopolitical. I actually think it's very geopolitical, and I'll explain why. I will take a few minutes, because we have a longer show now, to talk about that, if that's okay with the audience. So the anniversary for that, the 250th anniversary for that, is being celebrated. Actually, I think today it's being celebrated, though technically it's tomorrow. So I'm looking at this right now on search, and it says that the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, two separate battles. So today they're celebrating in Boston on Friday, and then in Lexington and Concord on Saturday. And that makes sense, because Paul Revere started his ride, I guess, on the 18th, and then on the 19th is when they all mobilized. And for those who aren't familiar with the story, basically, Massachusetts was in a unique situation from the other the other colonies, because Boston in particular lived under imperial control, where they had redcoats patrolling the streets, basically acting as the police force. And the reason for that was the Sons of Liberty. There was a lot of rising tension. You had the Boston Tea Party in 1773. The Boston Tea Party, of course, was when the most powerful corporation in the world at the time, the East India Trading Company, leveraged its relationships with the crown to impose a tariff, a tax on all non-East India Company tea. And the reason they did that was that they were in financial arrears. They were about to go bankrupt because of just a bunch of corruption that was happening at the corporate level there. And they had a ton of tea that was about to go bad, about to rot and go bad. And so in order to get rid of the tea, they imposed a tariff or a tax on all the other tea. And so in response to that, the colonists dressed up like Native Americans, got on canoes, rowed out to the ships, the East India Company ships, and threw all the tea into the Boston Harbor. And so events like that, there was a lot of like antagonistic events like that catalyzed and escalated the tension between the crown and the occupants of Boston. Boston Massacre was another one, where a protest turned violent, and then a bunch of redcoat soldiers, British soldiers, opened fire on a crowd of people and killed several people, including a child, I believe. So Boston became like the boiling point of the whole American Revolution, and of course, most people identify Boston as the most important place in the American Revolution and where it all started, like the birth of the American Revolution, so to speak. And so what ends up happening is that Patrick Henry gives his famous speech a month before. This would be March 20th in St. John's Church down in Virginia. So let's go ahead and just pull a map up. Maps are fun. We like maps. That one's not good enough. I'm going to get a good map. Yeah, this one's good enough. We use this one. So stand by for processing. Let's get this one. All right. So here's the map. And let me see if I can make it a little bigger. There we go. Yeah, so you can see that Virginia, encompasses Kentucky, North Carolina, and South Carolina encompass Tennessee, Georgia encompasses Alabama and Mississippi. And yeah, so the colonies are much larger than the states are now. The two most important colonies at the beginning of the American Revolution were, arguably, in my opinion, I guess others might disagree, but Massachusetts up here, and I wish you could see my pointer. I don't know if it'll let you, but I think everyone knows where Massachusetts is. Up here, there's Boston, and I'm going to do the GART read here in a minute. And Cape Cod, this is where we're actually going to be doing GART, so I will do the GART read after I tell this anecdote. The second most important, or I say the most important, in March of 1775 was Virginia. And the reason Virginia was the most important is, number one, Virginia had most of the agriculture. It had the strongest economy. It had the ability to support a war. Without Virginia's support, the war would not be financially feasible. It also had all of the intellectual leaders, most of the intellectual leaders, Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, among many others. And then it also had many of the most revered military leaders, George Washington, of course, being the most famous. So without Virginia's support, there is no revolution. And so Massachusetts makes the decision that they are going to go to war with, they want to rebel against the crown. And so in March of 1775, a meeting is convened in St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. 3 groups are invited, and the 3 groups that are invited are really, there were 2 groups invited: the land gentry. And the land gentry you can think of as like the richest guys, the wealthiest guys in the colonies. And back then, it would have been like you owned an entire county. So if you could imagine like the massive tracts of land that these guys would have owned, and then they would have leased that land out to farmers and whatnot. But the land gentry were basically the aristocrats, the guys who would have been called the second sons. Virginia was known as the colony of the land of the second sons, and it was because aristocrats who had no right to the titles and the land and castles of their fathers because they were the second born took their inheritance and went to Virginia primarily. They also went to South Carolina, bought up land, and basically became land barons in the New World. And so these were the guys who were doing the most business with Britain, with London. They had the greatest sense of loyalty because, they viewed themselves as like the aristocracy. Their cousins, their brothers, their family were back in London and Britain. And so there was a real sense of loyalty. However, they were, in a lot of cases, disenchanted with the system because they were the ones who were basically suffering the most from these taxes and tariffs, and felt like their rights were being infringed the most, and all these measures were being foisted upon them without any representation in the parliament. And they were educated enough to understand what that meant, and were used to those who were first generation immigrants were used to that representation back home. So that was the first group. The second group was kind of like the intelligentsia class, the doctors, the lawyers, the educated men who owned farms, who had land, but didn't have, massive counties, massive tracts of land. But they had plenty of land, large plantations, large farms. They could feed, their neighbors, that sort of thing. And those are really the two biggest groups, or the 2 groups that kind of viewed themselves as like the leadership, the colonial leadership. And Thomas Jefferson would have been like the spiritual leader of this second group. There was a third group that George Washington insisted come to this meeting, and this would have been the blacksmiths. The blue collar guys, the guys who owned very small pieces of land, enough land to have a shop, maybe a very small, like a large garden, small farm, just enough to feed your family. And certainly like George Washington viewed them as the backbone of, if there was going to be a revolution, these guys were going to be the most important. Most of them, they skewed very young. They were kind of considered the deplorables. And the first group, the land gentry, wanted nothing to do with these people. They were like, these guys are peasants. I understand that they're landowners, but are they really landowners? They don't own anything more than like the land where their shop is. I'm not really interested in what their opinion is here. And I'm certainly not going to risk everything that I own, to go fight a battle so that they can get a few more, scraps from the table. The second group, Thomas Jefferson's group, I think was a little more sympathetic to them. But that the party of false decorum, that stuff just is very powerful and potent. And Chris Paul talks about that kind of stuff all the time, those social dynamics. But George Washington insisted that these guys come. And when the meeting began, there was a lot of arguing about whether or not they were going to join Massachusetts. There's a lot of debate. The second group, the intelligentsia class, really wanted to do it. The first group had mixed feelings. They had cold feet. And the third group, of course, wanted to do it. The blue collar deplorables wanted to rebel. And so in all this chaos, the room's screaming. The whole meeting is falling apart. The room is yelling at one another, screaming at one another, and it looks like it's going to fail. And then George Washington goes over to the leader of this third group and says, "Hey, I really need you to get up and say something because we're about to lose the room here." And so this guy, he's a relatively young lawyer / farmer, kind of splits his time between his law practice and running the farm in Hanover, Virginia, which is about right where it's kind of like where the eye is in Virginia right here. North of that, if you go straight up from there, it's like right around here. That's that's Hanover. That's where this guy lived. And so this guy gets up and he gives this really, really just captivating speech talking about how every single person in that room, regardless of their station in life, was a slave to King George, and that no matter what they did in their lifetime in this colony, they would never be anything more than a tax slave, basically. And they would always have to grovel to King George for anything they wanted, regardless of what their name was and who their parents were, who their father was. And ended the speech, of course, give me liberty or give me death. And that guy was Patrick Henry. And that moment, despite all of the arguing and differences that all these people in this group had, they all of a sudden understood how important this moment was and what they had to do. And so they put all those differences aside. They all agree that, yes, we do need to go fight. And that, of course, changes the whole course of the revolution, makes it happen. But I would argue it actually changes the whole course of human history, because the American Revolution was not just a revolution in the American colonies. It becomes, during the 8 years that they're fighting the British, a worldwide conflict where there are battles happening on basically every continent: North Africa, the Mediterranean, Central America, the Caribbean. There is rebellion happening all over the place against the British Crown, as the other British colonies are learning about this thing that's happening. They then start being inspired to do it themselves. And of course, Benjamin Franklin played a big role in that. He was traveling the world for 30 years, mostly in Europe, mostly in France, establishing allies and getting the French to kind of spread the word and the French to help set up these networks. And so 4 weeks after this incredible speech happens, we're at Lexington and Concord. It's at a total fever pitch. You have a guy up there named John Hancock, who's kind of like the entrepreneur of his day. He's like I don't want to say Elon Musk, but he's like the famous entrepreneur who does tons of business with the governor of Massachusetts, tons of business with London, views himself as one of them, just like these other land gentry. But rather than being part of a land gentry, he's really more of like a self-made entrepreneur. He's a very, very wealthy entrepreneur, and he has the most to lose. And he ends up giving lots of money to Paul Revere and Sam Adams and John Adams and for weapons, because he understands that we're going to need weapons if we're going to fight this war. So he basically finances an armory of muskets and musket balls and gunpowder, and they go and they hide this stuff at these people's farms outside of Boston, like around Lexington and Concord. And the British find out about this, and so they're like, "We're going to go seize these weapons. Like we understand that these weapons are being taken and they're being consolidated, and before anything can happen, we're going to go take the weapons." And so they land at Boston. They start marching off, and that's what inspires the ride of Paul Revere's. They understand the British are coming to take our guns. Everyone needs to go. Like, it's now or never. If we don't do it now, we're going to lose the guns, and then there's not going to be a revolution. So the Paul of Ride Revere, the British are coming. The British are coming. They were coming to take the guns, and so they fight at Lexington and Concord. The Americans win. They have a victory there, but then George Washington shows up with the reinforcements from Virginia. And had George Washington and the reinforcements from Virginia not shown up, there wouldn't have been a regiment of force substantial enough to hold off the British and actually make the revolution happen. It would have just been like basically like what today they would call, insurrectionists, terrorists, troublemakers, rabble rousers. So that just goes to show how does something like that happen? How does the American Revolution actually pick up momentum and evolve into something that's big enough to what we recognize today, to what the entire world recognizes today as like this amazing, monumental shift in not just like geopolitics and political thinking and political philosophy, but the way that people think about human individual liberties, self-governance, the right to self-determination, the right to sovereignty. I mean, all of those things come into fruition as a result of that conflict, of that decision to stand on their feet and fight these guys. And it began really with just a room full of guys talking about this in theory, in taverns and in churches. And at any given time throughout the entire course of the war, there was only about 1% of the entire population was actually participating. I think in total over the whole 7 or 8 years, 3% of the entire population participated, but everyone wasn't fighting all at once. You would sign up for a tour of duty, and then you would go serve, and then you'd go back to your farm and take care of your family. And so it's not like everyone who signed up was serving in the military or serving in the militia all at the same time. And then of course there were people providing supporting roles who weren't actually fighting, but were part of logistics. There was the Culper Spy Ring up in Long Island, which was Washington's intelligence gathering service, which was really just started by a couple of people in a small town, basically Anons, and once the Washington learned of them, he tapped into that. That's an amazing story too. But this isn't a breaking history episode. Somebody asked me if I would address the significance of what tomorrow is. And tomorrow is April 19th, the day that these guys who woke up in the middle of the night when they heard Paul Revere's call and then gathered at these barns to take the weapons, met at Lexington and Concord and stood up against the British. And it was the inflection point of everything. It's what started everything. And today, April 18th, 2025, we are still continuing what they started 250 years ago, because the British never lost. They retreated and they signed, basically an armistice. But they came back with a vengeance in 1812. Before that, they came back with political parties and tried to take control of the new American government with political parties, and then with the War of 1812, and then with bankers, the banks. Andrew Jackson defeated that, and then with the Civil War, and then with the robber barons, and then with killing President William McKinley, who had the tariff program that made America the wealthiest it ever was in the 1890s, the wealthiest it ever was in its entire history. And they killed him in 1901 while he was president. 10 years later, you had the Titanic, where all of the guys, all the oligarchs, the white hat oligarchs who opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve just happened to be on board. All the guys who were pro Federal Reserve, who were supposed to be on the Titanic, just happened to not show up the day it left. And so the Titanic was a false flag. 2 years later, you then have the creation of the Federal Reserve, and the rest is kind of history. Most of you know the story from there. The implementation of the income tax, especially after World War II, to replace the tariff system, so that you're no longer taxing the oligarchs who are importing goods, guys like John Hancock. You are extracting the wealth from the blacksmiths, from the people who actually are the lifeblood of the civilization and the society. And that's where we are right now. And that's where we've been for quite a while. And it's why America is, or has been, on its death rows. And it's really a testament to how wealthy our country is. The fact that we're still are here and we're still sustaining ourselves. And we also have a relatively high standard of living, considering, except minus all of the financial debt that everyone is being buried under because of the hyperinflation and whatnot. But I digress. I think the important thing to remember from this anecdote is, number one, Patrick Henry giving that speech that creates a sense of unity in a moment where we needed it. But the unity wasn't everyone just putting aside their differences and never again debating, like having a debate. It's people agreeing that we're going to go and embark on this endeavor, but then we're going to turn around and we're going to continue to debate and argue and disagree on stuff and hash out our differences, so we can really sharpen the edge of whatever this thing is that we're creating and get the best ideas on paper. the right of Paul Revere to rally everyone when they came for the guns, to get everyone lined up at Lexington and Concord and ready to start shooting when the time came. That was like the rubber meets the road. And then finally, July 4th, 1776, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, and the guy who financed all Lexington and Concord and bought all those guns and bought the gunpowder and bought the musket balls, John Hancock, who was very good friends with all of these British lords. When it came time to sign, he stood up in front of everyone and said, I want to sign first. Signed his name the largest to tell everybody when the time comes to hang everybody, when this thing fails, make sure you hang me first. And I think if everyone had that mindset, this thing would be over a lot faster than we think. But that's the kind of like selflessness that I think a lot of the founding fathers had. And while they weren't perfect, and they certainly didn't all get along, a lot of them hated each other. They had that sense of service, that sense of sacrifice, that sense of selflessness, to risk everything to create a better future. And a lot of them didn't even live to see what that future would look like. So anyway, that was very long-winded. Let's do, Claire Cat 367. If we do not hang together, then we shall surely hang separately. That was exactly what they said. All right, so now that we're 30 minutes into this, 28 minutes into this, let's do our first ad read. Badlands Media is headed to Plymouth, Massachusetts. So there you go. We're going right back to where this all started. I told you I'd bring this all full circle. We're headed to Plymouth, Massachusetts with the 8th stop on the Great American Restoration Tour, May 1st through 4th. Don't miss out on the conversations and shenanigans. Get your virtual tickets today. With virtual tickets, ensure you are part of the action wherever you may be. You'll gain access to an exclusive GART chat to interact with other people, other in-person and virtual attendees. Get behind-the-scenes photos and videos. Get to ask the panel questions, so you can be part of the live discussion. And while many of our show hosts are at the conference, you may notice some changes to our regularly scheduled programming. Get your fix of Badlands Media by purchasing your virtual ticket today. And if you can't watch live, don't fret. Replays of the entire event will be available to all ticket holders. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/events for details on both in-person and virtual tickets. And I know we did a virtual, we did like a virtual stream yesterday for ticket holders. I think they did one last week as well. So I know we've done at least 2. I don't know if there's been a third one that's happened yet, but we're going to plan to do a few more before the event. So anyway, I digress. All right. So now to the news. Where do we start today? Well, I was on Badlands Daily earlier, and we kind of talked about Ukraine and Wyckoff and this division that's happening. And I think that is, to me, that's the most compelling and most important storyline that is evolving in the world right now. This story just posted here at what looks like, is that 2:13? Yeah, so 15 minutes ago. Let's take a look at this. Let's see if we can get it like that. There we go. I like that a little better. All right. So U.S. to walk away if Ukraine talks become very difficult. I'm reading this for the first time, but I'm just going to be responding to this in real time. Washington still hopes to see the fighting stop, the U.S. president has stated. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Washington could abandon efforts to find a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict if Moscow and Kiev don't engage in negotiations. He added, however, the U.S. still hopes to see the fighting come to an end. Speaking to reporters on Friday, Trump was asked to comment on remarks by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who had suggested that the White House could walk away from efforts to broker a settlement. If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say, you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, Trump said, adding, we're going to just take a pass, but hopefully we won't have to do that. I love him. Yeah, and that's the end of the story. But you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people. Very eloquent. Yeah, and you know this. I think there's definitely some method to the madness here. I think I've talked about in the past, maybe on this show, about how I do view as some of the people in Trump's cabinet as they're there for a specific reason. They may or may not have earnest intentions, honest intentions. I do think they're doing what Trump is asking them to do. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't keep them around. But I do think Trump brings in certain personalities because he knows those personalities are useful to whatever it is he's trying to accomplish. For example, when he would bring John Bolton around during his first term to all these meetings, and everyone was like, why the hell is John Bolton in the Trump administration? This guy is a neocon, warmongering shill. And now Trump, like last year during the campaign, was talking about how, like, laughing about how the reason he would bring John Bolton around is just to put him in the corner of the room and remind everybody that we do have these frothing at the mouth psychopaths who will bomb everything they can possibly get their hands on. And therefore, standing next to John Bolton, Donald Trump seems like a pretty reasonable person to deal with. And so it would drive people into the arms, like these people on the other side of the table, it would drive them into the arms of Donald Trump, knowing that the alternative when Trump leaves office is they get the neocons again. I kind of think that's kind of what he's doing here with some of these people he's put in office, because it's believable. Like, let's just assume for the sake of argument that every single person appointed to the cabinet is doing exactly what Donald Trump wants at all times. I think it's a fair assumption. Their backgrounds, Mike Huckabee comes to mind, is very, very authentic. Like when Mike Huckabee talks about supporting Israel and talks about Palestine not being a real place, that's very authentic because that's what he's been saying for 20 years. So it's not like bringing in some random person you've never heard of before and them forwarding a narrative that you don't know if they're actually speaking genuinely or not. I think Mike Huckabee is speaking genuinely when he talks about Palestine being erased from the map and supporting Israel no matter what it is they want to do. And that doesn't mean that's what Donald Trump wants to do ultimately, but I do think that by having those people in the room making those arguments, it stirs controversy, it stirs conversation, and it forces people to confront a situation rather than acting like it's not, that dynamic doesn't exist. It very much does exist. And that's what we're seeing here with Ukraine. So this story is Trump envoy repeating Russian nonsense. This is according to Zelensky. The Ukrainian leader has claimed that Steve Wyckoff's rhetoric is dangerous. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Wyckoff has been spreading nonsense about Ukraine's territories, Vladimir Zelensky has claimed. Although Wyckoff is U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, he has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin 3 times this year in an effort to help broker a ceasefire between Kiev and Moscow. The diplomat mentioned that he had discussed Russian territorial demands, which angered Zelensky. Quote, I believe Mr. Wyckoff has adopted the strategy of the Russian side. I think this is very dangerous as he is wittingly or unwittingly spreading Russian narratives, end quote, the Ukrainian leader said on Thursday. He added that Wyckoff has, quote, no mandate to discuss territorial changes. That's why I don't really understand what he's saying. We've heard this before. This is Mr. Putin's nonsense. I didn't expect that he would have certain people in civilized countries repeating these narratives. That's why I don't take this seriously, Zelensky said, according to the news media or the news website Telegraph. Zelensky reiterated that Kiev will never recognize any temporarily occupied Ukrainian territory as Russian. Wyckoff spoke with Putin for more than 4 hours in St. Petersburg on April 11th. That's a week ago. The diplomat told reporters after the meeting that a potential peace deal hinges on the so-called 5 territories. It's a complicated situation rooted in some real problematic things happening between the two countries, Wyckoff told Fox News. He remained optimistic that the Trump administration would broker a permanent ceasefire. In 2014, Crimea voted to secede from Ukraine and become part of Russia following a Western-backed coup in Kiev. The Donbass republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, as well as the regions of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. I think it's Zaporizhzhia. Yeah, Zaporizhzhia. Did the same. This Cyrillic really gets me. My Irish tongue isn't made for it. Did the same in September 2022. Russia demands that Ukraine withdraw its troops from the parts of these regions it still controls and renounce its territorial claims. Moscow insists that Ukraine must drop its plans to join NATO and become a permanently neutral state. Last month, a U.S. brokered 30-day moratorium on attacks on energy infrastructure. Last month, the U.S. brokered a 30-day moratorium on attacks on energy infrastructure. However, both sides have accused each other of violating the accord. Kiev has broken the energy truce more than 80 times since it was announced on March 18th. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Thursday. Yeah, and so the problematic things that the problematic things happening between the two countries that Steve Wyckoff is referring to is the creation of the Azov Battalion by Ukrainian oligarch Igor Kolomoisky in 2014, the invasion of Crimea by the Azov Battalion, and then the subsequent persecution and torture of pro-Russian citizens throughout the Crimea, and then just the general suffering of the Crimean people at the hands of this Kiev government. And that would be like turning off their water, turning off their energy, their electricity, cutting off supplies to them. Generally the same kind of stuff we've seen happening like to Gaza was happening to Crimea. But I think it sounds like on an even more sinister level, because these were technically their own citizens, unlike in Gaza. Gaza's a separate country from Israel. So they were, the police were, or the Azov Battalion were arresting these people and keeping them detained and, like according to reports, torturing them, and basically engaging in terrorism, like a fear campaign against the Ukrainian people. And I'm sorry, I was reading this article that whole time. So this is the article I was reading. Sorry about that. So Trump, the two articles we just covered, Trump says that he's willing to walk away if everyone's going to act like a fool. And Wyckoff, or Zelensky rather, is attacking Wyckoff because Wyckoff has been saying that that he thinks Russia really wants to have a deal. And there was I didn't have this other story pulled up, but I figured since we're talking about it, let's pull up this other story. Here it is. This is from 3 days ago. Putin wants permanent peace in Ukraine. This is what Zelensky was responding to. Steve Wyckoff met the Russian president last week as part of a broader effort in hostilities. I'm not going to repeat everything that I just read from the other one, but Steve Wyckoff told Fox News that Russian President Vladimir Putin is pursuing a permanent peace and a legally binding settlement in the Ukraine conflict. Wyckoff, tasked by U.S. President Donald Trump to lead negotiations with Moscow, met with Putin and two of his senior advisors on Friday. The U.S. envoy shared details of the talks in an interview on Monday, describing the nearly 5-hour meeting with Putin as compelling and saying it brought the Ukraine peace process to the verge of a breakthrough. According to Wyckoff, Putin is pursuing a lasting solution, so beyond just a ceasefire, we got an answer for that. We got an answer to that, the envoy said, adding, it took a while for us to get to this place. A key part of the deal, Wyckoff said, would be the recognition that Crimea, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions are part of Russia. However, he emphasized that the proposed agreement goes beyond territorial issues. Their security protocols, NATO Article 5, which is collective security, a lot of detail attached to it. It's a complicated situation, he said. Still, Wyckoff said he believed the two sides might be on the verge of something that would be very, very important for the world at large. Friday's meeting with Wyckoff's third with the Russian president since February. Trump has repeatedly said he aims to end the hostilities in Ukraine as quickly as possible. Russia has maintained it is open to peace talks, provided that its key security demands are addressed. Moscow opposes any NATO presence on Ukrainian soil and has demanded that Kiev demilitarize, denazify, adhere to a posture of neutrality, and recognize the territorial realities on the ground. The Russian government has insisted it will not accept a freeze of the conflict, which it maintains will only lead to renewed hostilities later on. Moscow has cited Ukraine's violations of a U.S. proposed moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure as proof of Kiev's untrustworthiness. Commenting on Putin's meeting with Wyckoff, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Tuesday there were no clear outlines of any agreement yet, but that there was the political will to move forward. Moscow, he added, values the constructive and substantive contact with the U.S. side. The real crux of all of this is it's not really Zelensky. I mean, Zelensky is a puppet. Zelensky is a figurehead for something far more sinister and in my opinion, criminal than what he is. And I think most people recognize that he's kind of like an opportunistic shill. He's like an actor. There's been a lot of speculation that maybe he may not be working for the people we think he's working for. He could be working for other people, like meaning the white hats. Maybe. I mean, some of the stuff has done certainly has beclowned the deep state. So I think those arguments are very compelling. But, you know, he's the front man for something that goes back much further than him. He only came into power, I think, in 2018. When did Zelensky come into power? Zelensky's term begins, was it 2018? May 20th, 2019. That's an interesting date. May 20th, man. It's my birthday. But that's the same date as the sword dance. 2 years after this, so 2 years after the sword dance to the day, he enters office, and of course he's extended his term because he's gone beyond when his term was supposed to end. He canceled all the elections. So I mean, 2019, this conflict was 5 years old at that point. So there's 5 years of actual war with Russia in Crimea fighting Ukraine. Fighting the Azov battalion. And prior to 2014, there was, prior to that invasion, there was, misconduct on the Ukrainian side against its own people that led to that invasion, and all culminating, of course, in the Maidan coup when the CIA overthrew the legitimately elected Ukrainian government and installed a member of the Israeli mafia, a lieutenant from the Israeli mafia who was part of the Ukrainian security Ukrainian intelligence agency, the SBU. He was installed as the temporary president for like 6 months until they could get the Petro Poroshenko elected, and then they got him in as like the legitimate U.S. puppet. All right. Where does that leave us? Yeah, so okay, we're gonna do 2 more on this, and then we'll pivot. So, and how's the chat doing? I haven't had a chance to check in on the chat. I don't have multiple screens here, so I can't watch the chat while I'm speaking. Okay, I saw somebody saying that it was frozen. I hope it's not. Just try refreshing if it freezes. Matt Arrett told me that every single person he's been doing streams with who live in Virginia, he's had like serious streaming issues with. So it may not actually be my computer, and it may not be the internet at my house. It could just be the internet in my area. I have no idea. So other people have told me that they've been having internet issues as well. So hopefully it's not a big issue. All right, so let's go to this guy. A lot of this article is from yesterday. It says a lot of nations seeking to derail U.S.-Russia talks, Putin envoy. The American media landscape is full of propaganda, Kirill Dmitriev has said. Numerous foreign actors are attempting to sabotage the dialogue between Moscow and Washington. Russian President Vladimir Putin's investment envoy Kirill Dmitriev has claimed. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Dmitriev weighed in on his talks with U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Wyckoff in St. Petersburg last week, which focused on finding a settlement to the Ukraine conflict. Dmitriev called the negotiations extremely productive, but claimed that third parties are trying to impede progress. Quote, a lot of people, structures, and countries are trying to disrupt our dialogue with the United States, end quote, he said. There is a very active propaganda campaign against Russia and the United States through various media, so it's very important to communicate Russia's position directly. Sorry, my kid's school just sent out a text message. I was just making sure that everything was okay. There's a very active campaign, a propaganda campaign against Russia in the United States through various media. So it's very important to communicate Russia's position directly, and this has certainly been done, Dmitriev noted. There's a very useful dialogue going on. It is certainly going on in very difficult conditions, constant attacks and constant misinformation, he said. Asked whether the sides have made progress, the envoy replied, "Time will tell." The Trump administration has been pursuing direct talks with Russia's leadership in order to agree a ceasefire to the Ukraine conflict, in contrast to most EU countries, which continue to insist on supporting Kiev for as long as it takes. As a result of U.S. mediation, Kiev and Moscow agreed on a 30-day moratorium. Yeah, we know all that. We've read that 2 or 3 times now. So this is the guy who was in Washington, I think a week and a half ago. If I have my days right, I think he was in Washington. He trolled everybody on X by taking a picture of like the cityscape in DC and saying it's a lovely day. And then went to the White House and met with various people, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent. And then I think he met with met with Steve Wyckoff in Russia when he returned back. But he's right. He's telling you this is the signal here. I wrote about this in the Badlands news brief this morning. And I did like 3 pretty long takes today, which I haven't done in a while. But this is the moment that's going to kind of test the sovereign alliance, not just in Ukraine, but in Israel as well, like with Iran. We'll get to that here in a minute. But if Putin's led Russia forms an alliance with MAGA, forms an alliance with the American people, going around the Washington establishment, subverting the Republican Party, subverting the GOP, which does not want peace with Putin. It's very important to understand that. And if you don't believe me, just go listen to like what even the alternative media people like Charlie Kirk is saying. Charlie Kirk is not pro Putin. Neither is Mark Levin. Mark Levin was just appointed yesterday as like a special consultant for the Department of Homeland Security to work with Kristi Noem on developing border policy. He has actually been attacking Trump a bunch for Trump even engaging earnestly with Putin. He thinks that Putin is super evil and we should fight Russia to the bitter end. So there are a lot of people at the forefront who identify themselves as MAGA, who claim to speak for the rest of us, who all say that we have to fight Russia no matter what to the bitter end. And it's hard to penetrate those narratives because those people still reach so many within even this movement. Like even like the truth community still listens to like what Charlie Kirk says, and even guys like Mark Levin, I think, like influence to some degree people in our community. And so when they say that kind of stuff, it's like people are still afraid to just say that Vladimir Putin's the good guy. Vladimir Putin's the good guy, and I will debate any person out there on that argument. If Charlie Kirk wants to debate me on whether or not Vladimir Putin is a good guy, I will 100% debate Charlie Kirk. He just better bring some facts with him to support the narrative that Putin is evil. Because I've done my research now after getting ready for the episode I did with Burning Bright on the Book of Trump. And that's not the first time I've investigated Putin, but I did get a chance to go deep on it. And all the evidence I found is just that the battles that we're having right now domestically in America with these NGOs coming after groups like us, groups like Badlands. I mean, Ash was just fighting several NGOs in court. They came after her for reporting on election fraud in Colorado. And then they fabricated a false narrative in filed paperwork in like a civil complaint in court against her using false narratives. And she proved in court in front of a judge that they were lying to the judge. And I mean, man, I hope she's able to take those people to the cleaners. And these people, of course, are the NAACP, I think was one of them. There's a number of others, but these NGOs are a problem. Putin has been going to war with the NGOs in Moscow since 2000. He raided the offices of George Soros, the Open Societies Foundation, in November of 2003, shut them down, and then passed a series of laws over the following 12 years, culminating in like outright outlawing or criminalizing groups like the Open Societies Foundation in Russia. And the counter, like the thing that guys like Charlie Kirk are probably going to say to that statement is, well, that's not very American to not allow like an organization to operate in your country. These organizations are subversive groups that are financed, I believe, probably by the intelligence services. They certainly are orchestrated by them, and their whole purpose is to subvert and destabilize the governments of the countries that they operate in. That's the entire purpose. If the people in power do not comply with what the people in the State Department and CIA want them to do, then they remove those people from power. And there's more effective ways of doing it than invading with military force. It's much easier to convince the population, who many of whom are already unhappy because the world is a very broken place, that overthrowing their government or throwing out these people and electing new leadership, especially if you can provide that in the form of a puppet, is going to enhance their lives or improve their lives. And so that's what they do. The reason they haven't been able to do it in Russia against Putin is because Putin shut these groups down. He didn't mess around with them. He knew what they were because of his days in working in the KGB, and he prevented them from operating in Russia. And it's one of the reasons that he has so much support among the Russian people, is because he doesn't mess around. He doesn't play games with these people. He just deals with them. And I think we're seeing that similar mindset from Donald Trump, although he's using a different strategy to go about it, because I think in Russia it was much more clear. The propaganda machine wasn't as strong as, and there wasn't as much indoctrination, which is hilarious to think about. These people who were all at the time, you're talking about the year 2000. These people were people who grew up in the Cold War in the Soviet Union, and they were easy. It was easier to convince them that you can't trust these NGOs. Although maybe Putin leaned into the, like, these are Western funded NGO, like Cold War rhetoric. Who knows? But it's very, very hard to convince people, even in the truth community, that NGOs are nefarious. All NGOs. I don't trust any NGOs, including Turning Point USA, including Charlie Kirk. I don't trust multi-billion-dollar transnational organizations that operate in dozens and dozens of countries and have, 130,000 college volunteers working for them. And Charlie Kirk still has the ability to like play on X all day and follow Don Jr. around and get him Diet Cokes and carry his bag for him, as in his own words, that's what he was doing starting in 2016, 2017, while he was running this like multi-billion-dollar NGO. Like I just don't believe it. Like I think that it's very, very silly. I know people who in 2012, the same year that Turning Point USA was founded, tried to start their own 501c3, people who survived cancer. These are 65-year-old, 60-year-old men who survived cancer, who were very successful, who had access to a lot of resources, a lot of money. And they determined after like a year of trying to start a 501c3, they couldn't do it. They said, I'd have to amass like $100,000 at least in startup capital, 6 figures in startup capital, just to pay the administrators and the lawyers that I would need to do paperwork around the clock, just to have permission to operate. And it's like, and then you actually got to go out and accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish. And it's set up that way. It's set up that way so that random people off the street don't walk in and start their own NGO. So, yeah, I mean, I don't trust them. I think they're all, to some degree or another, vehicles, weapons of the deep state. And we should just proceed with caution when it comes to them. And that brings me to the last story I want to do on Russia. And then I'll do an ad read and we'll pivot to the Middle East. And that would be stand by for processing. I thought I had this one pulled up too. It was that was the one that I changed over to the Wyckoff story. This one. We'll do two more because this other story is notable and connected to this one. Trump aides clash. This is from 3 days ago again. Trump aides clash on trusting Moscow. Russia maintains that Ukraine is the side that stands in the way of a peace deal. U.S. President Donald Trump's senior advisors disagree on whether Moscow genuinely wants a peaceful resolution on the Ukraine conflict. A group led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg are urging greater skepticism, the report said. Trump, however, is siding with diplomatic aide Steve Wyckoff, who is said to be more trusting of Moscow. Last week, Wyckoff met with President Vladimir Putin after the two already held talks in March. So this is repeating a lot of the stuff that we already read, but I do want to skip to the part about Kellogg because John talks about him a bunch. As an example of Trump siding with Wyckoff, the Wall Street Journal cited the missile strike on the city of Sumy on Sunday, in which Kiev claimed that Moscow deliberately targeted citizens, killing 34. Trump, however, referred to the incident as a mistake, while Rubio's State Department called it horrifying, and Kellogg, meaning General Keith Kellogg, said it crossed any line of decency. And it's important to remember that General Kellogg was appointed as like the envoy for both Russia and Ukraine after like a month or two of operating. Russia came out and said, yeah, we don't want to work with him anymore. We don't trust him. We don't trust General Kellogg. And so Kellogg was basically taken off the Russian side, and now he's only the Ukraine envoy. Now, again, that could all just be narrative, whatever. But that's the reason that Wyckoff was brought in, is because Russia needs an advocate. Like Russia needs somebody who they feel that they can work with and they can trust. Otherwise, this negotiation is never going to go anywhere. And this all kind of speaks to a narrative that I think I covered on the show a few weeks ago, but it was by the Gateway Pundit, and it's worth rehashing. Yeah, here it is. Some 2 weeks ago. This is March 31st. It says Huckabee versus Wyckoff divide in Trump Mideast policy. Stop being duped by Hamas and Qatar. And this goes on to explain how Wyckoff was telling Tucker Carlson that Qatar is a good faith actor and that he's been friends with the Qataris for a very long time, at least the leadership that is in power now. Trump has been friends with the now Emir of Qatar for a very long time, Tamim, and that the Qataris want to position themselves as like the brokers of peace around the world. That's how they're trying to rebrand themselves. And the Saudis are trying to rebrand Saudi Arabia as like the crossroads of the world, where the conference room of the world, where people can come together to resolve their differences, where people can come to work out trade deals, where people can come to host their conventions, their conferences, what have you. It's going to be a tourist destination. That's how MBS sees it. Here's a quote. It says, speaking to Tucker Carlson, Wyckoff called the Qatari leadership good, decent people who want to be acknowledged as a peacemaker. Carlson noted that Qataris are almost universally accused in the U.S. media of being agents of Iran. Wyckoff called these accusations preposterous. Look, they're a Muslim nation. In the past, they've had some views that are a little bit more radical from an Islamist standpoint than they are today, but it's moderated quite a bit. And so he's referring to the fact that they, have housed Hamas, they've housed the Muslim Brotherhood, but they've also housed the CIA, MI6, Mossad. Like, there's a lot of different. They have the military-industrial complex. CENTCOM is located there. Wyckoff explained in the interview, by the way, that the Qataris, unlike every other nation on earth where we have a U.S. military base, the Qataris offered to pay for everything around the base. Like, normally we would be giving these countries millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars to build out the infrastructure, the roads, the utilities, whatever it is that has to lead to the base to support having a base there. The stuff that would be outside of the base, but would be necessary in order for the base to be there and be connected to, the host country. The Qataris just offer to pay for all that out of pocket. And I think it's because they see the benefit in having having CENTCOM in their backyard. I mean, nobody's going to go drop a bomb in Doha knowing that, General Michael Kurilla and CENTCOM are right there. So I think there probably is a big benefit in the Qataris' eyes to having CENTCOM there. Says, speaking to Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday, Wyckoff admitted, I thought we had a deal with Hamas, but maybe that's just me getting duped. And so that's what led to Huckabee basically saying, like, you're getting duped by the Qataris. They're messing with you. I do actually agree with the assessment that the Qataris being henchmen of the Iranians is a little silly, because up until 2018, the Qataris and the Iranians hated one another. And did not get along, just like the Qataris. I mean, just like the Saudis and the Iranians didn't get along. And it wasn't until Trump and MBS imposed a economic, political war, like psychological narrative warfare against the Qataris, starting in 2017 and carrying over until it actually got resolved, I think, January 10th, January 12th, 2021, like a week before Trump left office. I think they all convened and like signed like a peace deal, basically ending this narrative conflict. But that time period drove the Qataris into the arms of the of Iran. They hadn't been friends up until that point. And so I wonder if that kind of became the back channel that Trump used to speak to Tehran. That's just my speculation. But then this is the last story, and then we'll do a ad break. Again, 3 days ago, top Russian diplomat explains why Moscow trusts Trump. The U.S. president's common sense approach is a positive departure from the Biden years, Sergei Lavrov has said. Moscow is open to continuing negotiations with the U.S. because it sees a clear difference between President Donald Trump and his predecessor, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said. Unlike EU countries and the UK, the Trump administration is trying to get to the bottom of the issue and, most importantly, understand the root cause. I think it's a really, really important line. Understand the root cause of the Ukraine conflict. Lavrov told Kommersant in an interview published on Monday, the U.S. and EU organized and funded the anti-constitutional coup in Kiev in 2014, which triggered the confrontation with Russia, the foreign minister said. Trump has repeatedly said that the colossal mistake which led to the current events in Ukraine was the Biden administration's decision to drag Ukraine into NATO, Lavrov added. Asked whether American negotiators can be trusted, Lavrov said Moscow should not brush off Trump's overtures. During the first round of negotiations in Saudi Arabia in February, the U.S. delegation stressed that other countries have their own national interests that do not always coincide with the national interests of the United States, he said. According to Lavrov, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz made it clear that Trump values a pragmatic, common-sense approach to global politics. Lavrov said the message Moscow heard from Washington was that when their national interests don't align, Russia and the U.S. are responsible players on the world stage, U.S. and Russia as responsible players on the world stage must do everything possible to prevent those contradictions from escalating into confrontation. In areas where their interests do align, both sides should not waste an opportunity to pursue joint initiatives. Boom. That right there, I think that line right there is going to come back and be significant in Riyadh next month, because I think they have a lot of aligned interests in the Middle East and Africa. We know perfectly well what a mutually beneficial deal looks like, something we have never rejected, and what a deal designed to lure us into another trap looks like, Lavrov said. Trump initiated direct talks with Russia in February, stressing the need to broker a ceasefire between Moscow and Kiev as soon as possible. His envoy, Steve Wyckoff, met with President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg on Friday, marking their third meeting this year. Yeah, so I think I've said it on several shows now, but I do think we're going to get to a point where this like growing rift between Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, like the establishment Republican guys who do not view Putin favorably, who do not view Hamas and a lot of these Arab oligarchies favorably. They are basically going to be on one side of the table, and Putin and Wyckoff are going to be on the other side of the table, along with a lot of these Arab leaders, maybe even Iran. And I think Trump's going to side with the latter. I think Trump's going to side with the Sovereign Alliance, because I think that's what Wyckoff is representing in this dynamic. All right, let's do a ad read, and then we can pivot to. We will pivot to. I'll hit some of these rants. I see some rants in the chat, and then we'll pivot to the Middle East. All right, where are we? Where are we? What am I doing here? All right, perfect. We got a video to play. And that is our friends over at Block Trust IRA. BadlandsCrypto.com has partnered with Block Trust IRA to offer a secure path to convert your IRA or cash to cryptocurrency. The Patriots at Block Trust IRA offer real managed accounts with revolutionary AI and Animus technology that navigates the markets with computer-based precision, reducing the risk of the volatile cryptocurrency market. Animus AI Technologies was named the #1 crypto trading strategy in the world by 2023 by Bitcoin Magazine. Whether you have a retirement account like a 401k or IRA or just cash savings sitting in the bank making you little to no interest. With best-in-class military-grade technology, Block Trust IRA's clients are 100% insured for up to $200 million. In fact, at BadlandsCrypto.com, they are so confident in their ability to help you succeed that for a limited time, they are offering up to a $250 or $2,500 bonus in crypto when you open an account. Visit Visit badlandscrypto.com and learn more about the best performing asset of the decade. That's badlandscrypto.com. And thank you to Block Trust IRA. All right, let's hit some rants. All right. Claire Cat. Hey, Claire Cat. 367, $11. Rant challenge, a small contribution to help fund Easter baskets for your family. Thank you very much for all you do. Love your history lessons and Easter blessings. Well, thank you, Claire Cat. Yes. Happy Easter to everybody. Yeah, it's a good time to stop and reflect and think about all the things we are blessed for. We have a lot of things to be grateful for, especially the fact that we're all doing this right now. Not Badlands necessarily, but just the fact that we are awake and aware and trying our best in earnest to understand our world in a better way, and operating against these people who really want to take advantage of the situation. So lots of things to be grateful for, and blessings to all of y'all. Mama Lou, $20. Challenge accepted. Have a blessed Easter with your family, Gordon. Appreciate all the information at the geopolitical or the global geopolitical level. He has risen. Yes. Thank you, Mama Lou. I appreciate that. That is very, very generous of y'all. And I think I saw a few more. Mel213, $20. Thank you, Ghost. Have a wonderful Easter weekend with your family. Well, thank you, Mel. I appreciate that. Boom Diggity, $100. Wow, Boom Diggity. Thank you so much. That's very generous. Great show, Ghost. Happy Easter. Thank you, Boom Diggity. That really, really means a lot. Thank you to everyone. Yeah, happy Easter to everyone. Thank you. That's very, very generous. Man, Bravest, I don't disagree. I don't know what you're responding to, but you're saying I still feel like I know nothing. It's okay. There's so much. There's more stuff happening than we could possibly all track and understand anyway. So don't feel like you need to. I can't track everything that's happening, even at the geopolitical level. It used to be that I could follow all the geopolitics. I just couldn't follow the domestic stuff as closely. Now it's like I can't even follow all the geopolitics because there's just so much stuff happening simultaneously, and it's like I have to pick and choose where to dive deep, right? So it does feel like drinking from a fire hose at all times. All right, so we're going to pivot now to the Middle East. And let's see. Actually, wait, I just saw this story come up. Let's look at this one. Americans split on whether Russia is an enemy. 50% of respondents view the country as hostile, down from 61% in 2024. A survey by Pew Research Center suggests Americans are equally divided on whether Russia is an enemy of the U.S. The percentage of those holding this view falling to the lowest point since 2022, according to a new Pew Research Center poll released on Thursday, and coincides with efforts by the administration of the U.S. President Donald Trump to negotiate a resolution to the Ukraine conflict. According to the poll, 50% of U.S. adults view Russia as an enemy, down from 61% 1 year ago, and 64% and 70% in 2023 and 2022, respectively. Another 38% describe Russia as a competitor, and 9% consider it to be a partner. Well, I would consider myself to be in that 9%. It says the poll also indicated a pronounced partisan gap on the topic, with Democrats more likely to view Russia unfavorably. While 62% of Democrats say Russia is an enemy, only 40% of Republicans agree. Among Republicans, 45% say Russia is more of a competitor. Interesting. Okay, well, yep, that's a little noteworthy. U.S. withdrawing troops from Syria. And we covered this kind of briefly on Badlands Daily. And we certainly talked about Syria 2 weeks ago a lot. Like we did a pretty deep dive, I feel like, on Syria. And for those interested, I am actually going to do on the Book of Trump on Monday, I'm going to do Assad. So we did Putin this past Monday with Burning Bright, Righteous Russia. So this Monday, I'm going to do basically the same thing we did for Putin, but we're going to do it for Assad and Syria, and kind of like walk everything up to the beginning of the Arab Spring, basically, which is the start of the Syrian civil war. And then the Syrian civil war will be its own episode at some point in the future. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then the week after that, I've confirmed that I'm going to have Oak McCulloch on. Lieutenant Colonel Oak is going to come on, and I'll let you know what the exact topic is. I've thrown a few topics out to him, and I need to get with him on exactly what we're going to discuss. But I have he wrote a really, really great article years ago about maneuver warfare, like tank maneuver warfare, that I want to pick his brain on. And I think that's the right platform to do it, considering that we talk about Russian maneuver defense and maneuver warfare like all the time from a political standpoint. And so I feel like learning about it from a more kinetic standpoint and like what it actually is in its original state could be enlightening for a lot of us. It might help us better apply it to the political narrative stuff. So we'll see. But there's a number of other things that we could potentially discuss: Yugoslavia, Serbia, those kind of things. So I will let you know. But excited for that. Excited for Oak to come on and have that conversation. So let's now talk about Syria. U.S. withdrawing troops from Syria. Washington is reportedly closing 3 of its 8 bases in the country's northeast, which have operated since 2014 without Damascus permission. The U.S. has begun withdrawing troops from Syria, where they have been stationed without Damascus's consent since 2014. The New York Times and Associated Press reported on Thursday, citing government sources. According to the New York Times, the U.S. military plans to shut down 3 of its 8 operating bases in Syria's northeast and reduce troop levels from 2,000 to around 1,400. The bases reportedly set to be closed are Mission Support Site Green Village, MSS Euphrates, and a smaller unnamed facility. In 2 months, commanders are expected to reassess whether more cuts are needed. Sources told the outlet that commanders recommended retaining no fewer than 1,500 troops. The AP, citing its own sources, reported slightly deeper cuts, suggesting fewer than 1,000 U.S. troops will remain. Those remaining will reportedly continue supporting the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in counterterrorism operations and managing detention camps. Reports claimed the drawdown follows recommendations from ground commanders and has received approval from the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command. Neither the Pentagon nor the White House has officially confirmed the withdrawal. And then it just goes on to give background about what's happening there. This is interesting, though. U.S. President Donald Trump previously voiced skepticism about keeping troops in Syria. During the fall of Damascus in December, he wrote on social media, "Syria is a mess, but is not our friend. We should have nothing to do with it." Gosh, it's amazing how his tweets always age very, very well. Because I tend to agree with that, and I don't think that what has happened there in December was necessarily a net positive, though I do think it is a bridge to a net positive. Despite Assad's ouster, Russia has pledged to maintain its longstanding presence, and this is where we kind of get into the Russian maneuver defense for political narrative warfare, because I wonder whether Assad leaving was exactly that. And I know Chris and Burning Bread have said the same thing. Russia has pledged to maintain its longstanding presence and support for Syria during a meeting on Thursday with Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. That's this guy right here sitting with Putin. That's the guy who Trump has said, "I've been friends with this guy for a very long time." People will be very shocked to find that, to learn that. But he said that in September of 2017. He's like, "Nobody in this room is going to believe us, but believe me, but I've been friends with you for a long time." That's very interesting. President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed Moscow's commitment to Syrian sovereignty and territorial integrity. He also signaled readiness to work with Qatar to address Syria's humanitarian crisis and stabilize the country's security and economy. And then it goes on to talk about Russia's ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, later told reporters that Russian forces will continue operating from their established bases at Khmeim and Tartus, which they lease under a long-term agreement signed in 2017. And that agreement, I believe, is supposed to last for 49 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so let's talk about what all that means in relation to what we discussed last week. So last week we went over this map. I want to look up real quick, if y'all don't mind. I want to look up those bases that they mentioned. Which one was it? It was this one. No, it was this one. So they said that we are closing down. I want to see where in the map they are. I feel like the geography always so mission support site, Green Village. Let's see if we can get a map of that. Nope. The reason I'm curious is because of what I'm about to say. I just wonder if it is it in the south, the southern part of the Euphrates River? Because that would be a little too perfect for what I want to speculate. Nope, it's not there. Okay, so it's 29 miles south of Kanoko. Yeah, okay. I got a map here. Sweet. We can do this. This works. All right, so copy image, and we'll just bring it over here. We can just look at it side by side. All right, boom. All right, so mission support site Green Village, that's one of them that they're going to close. And this is a map from like another random article, so it's probably not going to have the exact ones that, maybe it will, the exact ones that they're going to close. That would be a little too perfect if they did. So they said mission support site Green Village, mission support site Euphrates, and a smaller unnamed facility. So, dude, this is the exact ones that I thought they were going to talk about. So I know that Deir al-Zor is a pretty important site. Like that, there's been a lot of like narrative deployments around that place over the years. There's been like battles between U.S. military and other forces. And so you can see like the purple here. This is like where the U.S. bases are. And then this turquoise is a U.S. enforced deconfliction zone. So like we control this. This is what I was saying last week. It's like we control this turquoise circle, and I don't know. Let me see when this map is from. This map is from December 6th, 2024. Okay, so that's when this article is from. And it says this is zones of conflict in Syria as of December 5th, 2024. Okay, so this map is from December 2024. We can call it current. But yeah, this is where the U.S. military controls this little circle down here. And then the purple is where we have all of our military bases. This map shows you where all of our military bases are. See these flags, these little symbols. What are these little symbols? Sorry, oil and gas facilities. So you have oil and gas facilities like all over the place, especially around Deir ez-Zor. Deir ez-Zor is like where the airport is. There's this right here, this facility. You'll see a oil and gas facility next to this military base. This is where there's a massive oil and gas facility right here, and I think there was like a bunch of conflicts with ISIS, if I recall correctly, in that region. So the reason that this is important and interesting, these are the two they're talking about closing down. They're the ones that are the closest to the southern part of the Euphrates River, and the reason why that interests me, as opposed to one of these other bases way up here, is because this David's Corridor thing that Netanyahu wants to set up. So the turquoise down here is where Israel already occupies the Golan Heights and have since 1967. Damascus is the capital of Syria. Aleppo is Turkey controls the purple. So the purple is like the Turkish army and their proxies, right? And then the HTS militants, like the ISIS guys, the ISIS Al-Qaeda guys who overthrew Assad, what they did is they came down and they took Hama and Homs. These are two large cities. And that basically forced Assad to retreat to Latakia up here. This is where the airbase is. So when they talked about the Khmeim Russian airbase, this is the Khmeim Russian airbase right here. Okay, see the little airplane. And then Tartus is the naval base where the Russians keep their naval ships. And these two bases are used by Russia to launch all of their military operations, not only for the Russian military, but also for the Wagner group into Africa. So they're important. They're very important. And I think they were first established back in like the Cold War, like in the 80s, 70s or 80s. So they've been there for a long time. And if you go, those who know their history and understand their history know that Catherine the Great, back during the American Revolution, was supporting Syria and Egypt against the Ottoman Empire and Britain. So the ties between Syria and Russia do go back to the American Revolution, as do the ties between America and Russia. So just interesting little parallels there. But so Turkey has taken control of Aleppo. You will remember that, let me see if I can pull this one up, of Trump, Erdogan, and Syria. Because back in 2019, Mother Jones, of course, Mother Jones is the one that pops up. Okay, Fox News. We'll see, and this is what I'm talking about. Like when I'm evaluating this stuff, I'm looking at how are the political players, how are the figures responding to events, how are they forwarding narratives, how are they engaging with narratives, are they presenting accurate information, are they being honest with people and like the public when they speak, and if they're not, do they have a reason not to be other than a nefarious reason? But then I also look at like how are certain outlets reporting stuff. Like if I know that there's an outlet that has nefarious ties, the Middle East Eye, I can tell you right now, is based in London. It was founded by the Muslim Brotherhood adjacent people, meaning it was founded by the MI6. MI6 is Muslim Brotherhood. And so the Middle East Eye is like a Five Eyes intelligence outlet, and it's staffed by a bunch of British people. I mean, I'm sure it has like Middle Easterners, Arabs and whatnot in there as well, but it's based in London. So it's not like it's based in the Middle East. They try to present that it is, but it's very much a City of London outlet. And their narrative, this is from the 30th of August, 2024, so last summer. It says Erdogan played Trump and lied to him on Syria, former Trump advisor McMaster says. So they're giving HR McMaster a platform, and they're saying how Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan played Donald Trump and convinced him that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad would be the inevitable winner of the Syrian civil war, according to a new book by Trump former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. McMaster, who served as the former president between 20 February 2017 and the 9th of April 2018, wrote in his recently released book, At War with Ourselves, My Tour of Duty in the Trump White House, that Erdogan constantly pushed Trump to withdraw U.S. forces from parts of northern Syria to allow Turkish forces to remove Syrian Kurdish armed elements. See, that is amazing. I didn't even plan that. We were talking about Turkey being in the north, and wow. In a phone call on the 24th of November 2017, Erdogan told Trump that there was no longer justification for U.S. support to the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces because the Islamic State group had been defeated. Like Russian President Vladimir Putin, Erdogan also, this is a quote, also portrayed Assad as the inevitable winner in the Syrian civil war to garner Trump's approval for a Turkey-Iran-Russia brokered end of the war, writes McMaster, referring to the conversation between the two presidents. Trump knew that what he was hearing were falsehoods, but Erdogan, like Putin, had figured out how to play Trump, how to play to Trump's distaste for sustained military operations in the Middle East. Erdogan described continued arms transfers to the SDF as a waste of money. McMaster claims Erdogan lied to Trump to prevent the development of a Kurdish army that might seek independence in Syria and lay claim to parts of eastern Turkey long sought by Kurdish nationalists. Putin and Erdogan were playing Trump, he wrote. If I allowed the situation to go unchallenged, I would be derelict to my duty as national security advisor. Okay, so deep state HR McMaster is telling you that the deep state was trying to convince Trump that he should arm the Kurds and help the Kurds perpetuate the war against Assad. If we go back to this map, the Syrian Civil War, I mean, here's the 2014 Syrian Civil War map. The blue and the light blue are anti-regime. The pink and the dark pink are the Syrian army. The yellow is like contested area. So you can see like Damascus is split right down the middle. It's contested in Damascus. I mean, look at how little Assad actually controlled in 2014 at the beginning. Wasn't the beginning of the civil war, but Russia didn't get involved until 2015. And then you can see from 2015, the black is ISIS, the red is Assad, the green is Syrian Kurds. The purple is Al-Qaeda, which, I mean, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, basically the same thing. It's like Coke and Pepsi. They're both backed by the CIA. And then Syrian rebel groups in the blue. And then the dark blue up here at the top is Turkey. So they're like almost non-existent up here in 2015. And then you can see progressively they are getting more and more territory starting in 2019. So you can see that the Turks, and a lot of these guys these are Turkish proxy guys who are going in and they're killing the ISIS leaders. So they're going in and they're fighting ISIS on behalf of Erdogan. But really, in my opinion, they're doing it on behalf of Trump and Putin, which is better than, U.S. troops going in there and doing it, frankly. Why risk our guys? But you can see between 2015, 2016, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are running the show in Syria. And then in 2019, they're completely eliminated, except for, this is where it gets really interesting. I mean, look right here. This map, it says Al-Qaeda is operating right here. And then if I go over here and you look, and this is not the only map I've seen portray this. That exact circle, according to this map, is actually controlled by the Al-Tanf garrison, which is a U.S. military garrison. So the U.S. military and Al Qaeda are like in control of the exact same places, depending on who you look like. And then this is a totally different map made by a totally different person, and they're saying the exact same thing. There's the Al Tanf military base that, like turquoise, is U.S. military. The black is ISIS. So yeah, I mean, isn't that funny? It's like, and I'm not accusing the U.S. military of funding Al Qaeda. I actually think the way that I view the Middle East, and I might be wrong about this, but the post 9/11 Middle East, the way I view it is that it was the CIA proxies, which would be Al Qaeda, ISIS, etc. There's a whole network of all those groups. ISIS is like a coalition of a bunch of different smaller groups. It's the CIA proxies against the U.S. military and the U.S. military proxies. Because one of the things, as I understand it, the U.S. military was doing is they were training up their own militias to go fight ISIS. So you had U.S. military trained militias fighting CIA trained militias, and yeah, I mean that's kind of the last 20 to 25 years of the Middle East, I think. But I could be totally wrong about that. But that's the way that I understand it. So I think what is happening here is that H.R. McMaster is telling you the truth. The Middle East Eye, I think, is reporting truth there. I think they're telling you the truth. Now, they're trying to frame it in a way to make Trump look like the bad guy, but they're telling you that what the deep state wanted is they wanted Trump to back the Kurds and give the Kurds the resources. The Kurds will be the yellow here in this map, to overthrow, to fight Assad, overthrow Assad, and take control, at the very least, take control of eastern Syria, if not all of Syria, but eastern Syria. I don't really think the Kurds are interested in Damascus. They really want their territory. Their territory extends beyond Syria into the eastern parts of Turkey, the northern parts of Iraq, and even the very western edges of Iran, which is up here. So I think that the fact that Trump didn't do that, he was like, nope, I'm not going to fund the Kurds. Instead, I'm going to back the Turks, and I'm going to let the Turks and the Russians go in there and figure this out. That is very, very signal, in my opinion, because now we see that Trump has backed, let's see. Yeah, and then here you go. Here's another article. Resignations followed Trump's betrayal of the Kurds. Is Biden's team as principled? So this is December 3rd, 2024. So here's a totally different outlet talking about how Donald Trump betrayed the Kurds. Interesting. And then Middle East Forum, Trump must not make the same mistake with Turkey and the Syrian Kurds. Turkey's Erdogan believes that Trump will defer to him, but he does not respect the U.S. president-elect. It's amazing. Like, Trump talked about how much he liked Erdogan back in 2019 and that he thought Erdogan was somebody he could work with. Yeah, so as we covered 2 weeks ago, I think that Erdogan is going to oppose Netanyahu in the Middle East. There is, if I go to the Times of Israel, I pull up an article about Turkey and Syria. There's a good article that I pulled up the other day that so it says here, Israel confirms talks with Turkey on Syria aimed at preserving security stability. Israel and Turkey delegations met in Azerbaijan Wednesday for this is from April 10th. Met in Azerbaijan Wednesday for Syrian deconfliction talks. The Prime Minister's office said Thursday the talks were aimed at preventing unwanted incidents as both countries' militaries operate in the country. Under the direction of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a political security delegation led by National Security Advisor Shaki Hanigbi, and with the participation of senior representatives of the defense ministry and the security branches, met last night with a parallel Turkish delegation. And then here is from the next day. Israel will need to get used to Turkey's growing footprint in Syria. Post-Assad Syria needs a strong country to help it out of the chaos, and Turkey wants in, with America backing Erdogan. So there you go. Trump's backing Erdogan. There's little Israel can do beyond insisting on red lines. Turkey's growing involvement in Syria reached recently reached a flashpoint with Israel following Israeli airstrikes in early April that targeted 3 Syrian air bases Turkey was reportedly looking to make use of. The incident prompted rare official statements from Ankara regarding its operations in Syria. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan told Reuters after the strikes that Turkey has no interest in fighting any country on Syrian soil. Yeah, because, so again, just to clarify, there were abandoned Syrian air bases in Syria that Turkey wanted to use. And so Israel found out about them and blew up and bombed the air bases. They couldn't be used. And so, this is escalation. It says, despite growing concern in Israel over Turkey's entrenchment in Syria, Jerusalem appears to be left with few options to counter it. Ultimately, quote, ultimately, when it comes to Syria, Turkey simply cares more about it than Israel does and invests accordingly. Israel's interest in Syria is purely security oriented. Galia Lindenstrass, a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies, told the Times of Israel that gives Ankara the upper hand. She added that U.S. President Donald Trump's backing for Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan further limits Israel's maneuverability. President Trump made it clear in the last meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington that while he's willing to help Israel with Turkey, Israel must make reasonable demands. He's pushing Israel to adopt a minimalistic approach in Syria. To prioritize, Israel will have to insist only on its most critical red lines, like preventing Iranian arms transfers to Hezbollah through southern Syria. And so that's I think the excuse they're going to use for setting up David's corridor. And I think the reason they want David's corridor is because they actually want to transfer. I think what they want to do is they want to send weapons up this corridor into Kurdistan, have the Kurds store them, because the Kurds oppose all the governments where they exist. And so if we pull up, I do have a Kurdistan map. It's a really good one. And it's in I have a smaller mind map that I made once I thought I was going to have like a bunch of different mind maps. And then I was like, this is silly. If I have all these mind maps, I'm like with different information in each one, I'm never going to know which one is the best one. And so I ended up just like combining them all, or combining as much of them as I could. But the Kurdistan one was a really, really good one that I had. Here it is, Kurdistan. So every single country that the Kurds exist in, they oppose the governments. So that would be Turkey, Syria, Iraq. I don't know about Armenia, but definitely Iran. So there's incentive for the Kurds to help Israel fight the people, the Iranian government, because they want sovereignty, they want self-determination, they want their land, and they want their own control over their own land from Iran. So that would be the reason why this area up here in Syria, if they were able to ship weapons up to the Euphrates River and then move them across north into Kurdistan, this whole orange area could become a network for moving those weapons around to then potentially strike Iran. They could maybe even get the weapons inside of Iran. So that would be a pretty good incentive for having the David's corridor if your ultimate outcome is to go to war with Iran. And so that takes us then to the Iran conflict right now. And I want to pull up an Axios article, but first we will read this one. Let's go to Axios and see what Barak Ravid is saying, because Barak Ravid is always pretty signal on the events. Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's look at this. This is from 2 days ago. Trump appoints Adam Bowler to expanded hostage envoy role after Hamas talks uproar. Do you remember this guy? I talked about this guy a bunch, and the media was like, had it out for this guy because he went on Jake Tapper's show and he called Hamas a bunch of nice guys. And everyone was like, we got to fire this guy. We got to destroy his career. and everyone acted like, and the media acted like because of the uproar they created over him, Trump basically like fired him or demoted him. It says President Trump expanded the portfolio of his advisor, Adam Boehler, and appointed him a special envoy for hostage response, according to a notification sent to Congress on April 4th and obtained by Axios. Boehler will coordinate across agencies on hostage issues and report to Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Boehler faced a political firestorm in March after Axios revealed he had met directly with Hamas officials, making him the first U.S. official ever to do so. Although those talks were approved by Trump, they sparked anger among some Senate Republicans, some of whom took the issue up privately with the White House. In mid-March, Boehler withdrew his nomination as special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, a position that requires Senate confirmation. The new appointment is temporary and does not require Senate approval. Boom. That's exactly what I speculated on weeks ago. Like, he was the one, he rug pulled his own appointment, and now he doesn't need to be approved by the Senate. And the Senate's not going to approve him anyway because they don't like him, because they're like, what are you doing meeting face to face with Hamas? And his position as well, meeting face to face with Hamas, because that's what you do when you want to broker a deal, bro. Love that. And yeah, I've long said Adam Boehler, I think he's the guy. I told John on his show like a month ago that if I'm betting on a horse, that's the horse I'm betting on, is Adam Boehler being the guy to figure all this out. Him and Steve Wyckoff, I think, are working together. And again, I always have to point this out because you get the slander, because a lot of my writing and my rhetoric is very anti Israel, or at least anti government of Israel, deep state of Israel. Both Adam Boehler and Steve Wyckoff are Jewish. And the fact that they seem to be working against the interests of Bibi Netanyahu and subverting what Netanyahu wants to accomplish, which is an expanded war against Hamas, against Iran, against Hezbollah. I don't know. I think that's signal to me. So Trump's team, I'm sorry, let's go to, this is the one that I wanted to look at. So this just came out 7 hours ago. Trump envoy quietly met Israeli officials ahead of Iran nuclear talks. Two top Israeli officials had an unannounced meeting in Paris on Friday with White House envoy Steve Wyckoff to discuss the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. Three Israeli sources familiar with the meeting tell Axios. And this is Barak Ravid. Barak Ravid is the guy that Trump always goes to with the signal. So if he's putting it out about the Trump administration, he's probably, my guess is that he's getting it directly from the Trump administration, and it's not like circumspection or, it's not coming from like the CIA or some shill from the State Department. It's coming from someone in Trump's circle. It doesn't mean what he's being told is the truth and nothing but the truth. It could be a strategic narrative deployment, but he does report, I think, what the Trump administration wants him to report. And that's the important signal, I think. So it says why it matters. Ron Dermer and David Barnea. So Ron Dermer would be the former former ambassador to the U.S. from Israel during the Trump administration 1, and now he is the Minister of Strategic Affairs for Bibi Netanyahu. David Barnea is the current Mossad director, who became Mossad director when Yossi Cohen had to resign in disgrace in 2022. After it was revealed that he was sneaking around with DR Congo with Dan Gertler trying to overthrow the government. Let's see. Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister and the Director of Mossad, there you go, intelligence agency, slipped into Paris for a low-profile meeting with Wyckoff to try to influence the U.S. position ahead of the second round of talks in Rome. On Saturday, the official said, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned the U.S. will reach a deal with Iran that's similar to the one the Obama administration signed in 2015 and President Trump himself abandoned. The Israeli Prime Minister's office and a spokesperson for Wyckoff declined to comment. Wyckoff was in Paris for meetings on Russia and Ukraine before traveling to Rome for the Iran talks. Between the lines, during those meetings, Wyckoff stressed that the Trump administration's goal on Iran is to resolve the nuclear crisis through diplomatic means and ensure Iran will no longer enrich uranium. Netanyahu, that's not entirely true. Wyckoff did say they can enrich uranium. It just needs to be under 4%. Netanyahu and other hawks want a deal to eliminate Iran's nuclear program entirely, or else a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Trump, who initially set a 2-month deadline for the negotiations, said on Thursday that he was in no rush to move forward with any with a military strike because he believes Iran wants to talk. The other side, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Wyckoff's counterpart to the talks, will arrive in Rome on Friday after a visit to Moscow, during which he met with President Vladimir Putin and discussed the negotiations with the U.S. Although Russia is not directly involved in the talks, the Iranians are seeking Russian support, including potentially to press their case with Trump. We hope Russia will play a role in a possible deal. Look at that. So not only do you have us speculating that Trump's going to go through Russia to get to Iran, you have the Iranians straight up coming out saying, we're hoping to go through Putin to get to Trump. It's like sovereign alliance much? Yeah, I think so. Araghchi added that the U.S. showed seriousness in the first round of talks, but said Iran hears conflicting messages from the U.S. in public and in private. What's said at the negotiating table is what matters, he stressed. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's neocon stuff. I think that's them being told something to their face, and then the neocons running around saying something else. And that's the same thing they accused the Biden administration of doing. The Russians said the Biden administration was doing that all the time, where they would say one thing through their channels, and then they would go out in public and say the complete opposite into a camera. And it's very frustrating to negotiate with someone like that. Araghchi added that a deal can be reached if the U.S. doesn't present unrealistic demands. One of those demands, Araghchi said, was that Iran completely halt uranium enrichment. And I agree with him on that. And here's why. You have to enrich uranium if you want to have a civil nuclear energy program. You have to have uranium enriched at 3.5%. I went and did the, armchair quarterback research. So I'm definitely an expert now, right? You have to have, I think, enrichment at 90% to make a traditional nuclear warhead, and then anything above 20% with enough quantity and with the right mechanism can be made into some kind of a bomb. This is what the theoretical science is, at least. Take that for what it's worth, which is pretty much nothing coming out of my mouth. The second round of talks on Saturday, but anywhere from 3.5% to 6% is considered like the sweet spot for what you need it to be in order to run a nuclear power plant. So to say we're not going to enrich any more uranium, which is, by the way, that's the Netanyahu talking point. Netanyahu and his guys are all saying we want zero enrichment, which means the power plant that Iran has, that they have run since 1975, the one that we, the United States, built for them and that the Russians helped them maintain after the Ayatollah came into power, they can't run that nuclear power plant anymore. That seems very silly to me. The second round of talks on Saturday will be held at the Omani embassy in Rome. They are expected to start around 5 a.m. Eastern time and last at least 5 hours. The U.S. wants the second round of talks to end with a framework for the next steps in the negotiation. Yeah, and then so there's Barack talking about. Okay, so real quick, we got like 10 minutes left because I would like to end at 4. Let's hit the last ad, and then I'll come back and do the last part of this. I'll do the last part of this story, and then we can wrap up. We'll hit rants and wrap up. And please hit the like or the thumbs up, however you say it, if you are enjoying the show. And let's do it's not an overlay, it is what happened to that ad? I thought that ad was, nope, that's not it. We can do a workaround because this video is not uploaded for some reason. So we will stop sharing. We'll represent the other window.
Rise and Badlands. By now, you've probably seen the new collab between Rise and Badlands.
Whoops.
But
Did I really just do that? I hit stop share, didn't I? I did. I did indeed do that. Let's flip back to this and then add it to the stage. There we go. That's how you do it. Now I can go back and play it.
By now, you've probably seen the new collab between Rise and Badlands Media. I'll tell you what you haven't seen yet. The end of Clown World as we know it. But have no fear. Introducing the latest addition to the Badlands INTL lineup. The sequel to the best-selling War series. We've been conditioned by these clowns to accept their circus. But it's time to unwind that. And strike them out the history books. The future belongs to the real. And we've got it in droves. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/rise for the full line of premium and direct-to-garment streetwear. Made to order right here in the good old US of A, the heart of the resistance. All of Clown World is upon us, patriots. Let's make it official.
All right. Thank you to Rise and Tire. I understand that people in the chat were saying that that the audio was low. So what I'm going to do is I'll upload it because it takes a minute for it to upload, and we'll play the video again as the outro. I think that's a good way to handle that so we can keep moving. We got let's see, we got back over here. We will present. Yeah, so this is where things I talked about this a little bit on Badlands Daily, but this is an interesting little story. This is like the narrative pincer happening at on Netanyahu. So you got Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. Naftali Bennett is this guy here on the left. He is a right-wing politician in Israel. He started this group, started a political party called the New Right in 2018, and targeted the most quote unquote right-wing factions of the Likud party. So he absorbed a lot of like the hardcore right wingers in the Likud party. Now, interestingly enough, he refused to bring in the Jewish Power Party, which is the Itamar Ben-Gvir's party. So like the really, really crazy religious fanatic guys, like the guys who think it's okay to starve the Gazans and think that that's totally morally justifiable. Like he does not want anything to do with those guys. And he kind of posits it like we are the hardcore right wing, but the secular hardcore right. Like, so we're secular Zionists, we're secular, which is not the religious hardcore right wing. The religious hardcore right wing is like Itamar Ben-Gvir. Lapid, and so Naftali Bennett is prime minister from June. He runs against Netanyahu in 2021, and he markets himself as 10% more right-wing than Netanyahu. That's how he brands himself. He wins the election. His party wins the election. His coalition wins the election. And he becomes the, but he has to partner, with this guy on the right, Yair Lapid, in order to defeat Netanyahu. So the guy on the left, Naftali Bennett, who's the right winger, he becomes prime minister for 12 months. The guy on the right, Yair Lapid, becomes the alternate prime minister for 12 months. And then in July of 2022, they switch. Lapid becomes the prime minister and Naftali Bennett becomes the alternate prime minister. Now, Yair Lapid is the leader of the opposition party in the Knesset to Netanyahu. So right now, Netanyahu, now that Itamar Ben-Gvir has come back into the Knesset and brought like his five supporters with him, the five politicians who have seats in the Knesset, and into the Netanyahu coalition, Netanyahu has a 68 seat majority in the 120 seat Knesset, which means the 52 seats that aren't in the coalition are led by the guy on the right, Yair Lapid. So the opposition leader is Lapid. Lapid was raised. I went and did research on him. He's raised, a while back, because he's been around for a little bit. He's a former television broadcast guy. So this would be like Sean Hannity, although I don't know if that's the right analogy, because Sean Hannity is considered conservative, but it would be like I don't know about Anderson Cooper, but some television personality. Just pick your favorite television personality running for office. That's what this guy is. He's like a TV anchor turned politician. He was raised by liberal activists, so he's like a left wing. He was raised a left winger. He forms a political party. I think it was right around 2018 as well, called the Blue and White Party. I'm pretty sure, I got to double check this, but I'm pretty sure Benny Gantz was part of that for a minute, and then Benny Gantz went and formed his own political party. But he focuses on taking the centrists from the Likud party. The Likud party is Netanyahu's party. It's the right wing. It's the right wing party. I think it's the largest like right wing party in the Zionist movement, which is 75% of the Knesset. So the guy on the left, Naftali, he takes the right-wing faction of the Likud party support away from Netanyahu. The guy on the right, he takes the centrist, which would be like, I guess you would say, the left-wing support of the Likud party away from Netanyahu. He also recruit, some communists from the Labor Party join his group. So that kind of tells you what their politics are about. The point is that this is a left-wing guy and a right-wing guy who are both now attacking Netanyahu. And we have to remind everybody that Israel was founded entirely by Eastern European socialists. The colonists who founded Israel were all from the Ukraine, not modern day Ukraine, but the borderlands of Russia, meaning like Belarus, Poland, modern day Ukraine, Russia. And they're all socialists. They're either socialists or communists. Some of the people who founded Israel identified as Bolsheviks at the time. And so all of them support strong centralized government and view that as a critical element in order to support and protect the Jewish state. So when you hear right wing in the context of Israeli politics, it's not the same thing as the conservative movement in America. The conservative movement is about limited government, decentralized government. In Israel, it is, I guess, the best, the quickest comparison would be National Socialists, not like German National Socialists, but like they described themselves in the 1930s as National Socialists, as fascists. So they describe themselves as, we are nationalists because we want our own country, and we're socialists. So we are National Socialists. And what that means is that they believe that the state should be in partnership with with corporations in order to, build up the economy. So it's socialism, but it's right-wing socialism, right? So very important. Both of these guys, because it's 4:00 now, we're going to wrap this up. Bennett and Lapid blast Netanyahu after reports strike on Iran was scuttled. Opposition leader says he suggested hitting Iran last October, but PM was afraid and blocked the proposal. Bennett says it is the Netanyahu doctrine to make empty threats. And so let's look real quick. Netanyahu suggests striking Iran oil fields. Because you'll remember back in October, 2 weeks before the election, Lindsey Graham was saying we should do this. And so here is October 4th, 2024. Biden suggests Israel not hit Iran oil fields after opposing strike on nuke facilities. Because the whole narrative back then was that Netanyahu wanted to do that. And here's October 15th. Netanyahu tells U.S. Washington Post, of course. You want me to pay money to read your drivel? November 12th, Netanyahu hints that he would hit Iranian oil fields if Tehran attacks. So now then he had to change his narrative after his rhetoric after Trump won, because obviously Trump wasn't going to back it. Here it is. Politico, October 4th. Israel could bomb Iran's oil. Energy markets are noting it, but not panicking. And then Biden came out, our boy Blue came out and said, no, you're not going to do that, which is the real reason he didn't do it, is because the U.S. said you're not going to do it, which I think it's a devolution proof. But I have a very, very specific view of all this stuff, so I understand why other people aren't going to agree with me, and that's okay. But going back to this story, these two are accusing Netanyahu of being the one who blocked it, which is a strategic political play, of course. I get that. But it's interesting because Netanyahu is known as the war hawk in Israel. Everyone knows that nobody wants to go to war more than Netanyahu. And if you mess with Israel, Netanyahu's your guy to defend Israel. He is like the David of Israel, right? That's how they brand him. And so that's why he always keeps people in Israel whipped up in a state of fear that they're going to die at the hands of Hamas or Iran or whoever, because then they run to support Netanyahu, knowing that if they go support one of these other guys, they may not be as strong militarily as Netanyahu or as aggressive. But these two guys are now saying that Netanyahu is afraid and he blocked the proposal. He's all bark and no bite. They call it the Netanyahu doctrine. It says, back in October, I proposed attacking Iran's oil fields. This is Lapid. Lapid said, but Netanyahu was afraid and stopped it. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who will likely compete with Netanyahu for right-wing votes in the next election, that's October 2027, I believe, implied that the premier was himself behind the leak of the stalled plan to the New York Times. I think it might be 2026. The Netanyahu doctrine is to threaten, and then leak that he meant to do something but was prevented from doing it, Bennett said in the statement, adding that this was another dangerous conception that mustn't blow up in our faces. There won't be another such opportunity to hit Iran. So both these guys are saying they should go hit Iran, like we need to go strike Iran right now. They're putting the pressure on Netanyahu to do that. Trump, meanwhile, is stepping forward and saying, I wouldn't say I waved off the Israeli plan to attack Iran, but I'm not in a rush to do it. Like, maybe we will do it. You never know. That's a negotiating tactic, of course, but I also think it kind of opens the door for these guys to like really lay it on thick and be like, well, Netanyahu's not the one in charge. Trump's the one in charge. So what's the point of having Netanyahu? Why vote for Netanyahu? If you vote for us, we'll just go strike Iran. We don't need Trump to go to war with Iran. And that's going to probably bait Netanyahu into doing something really stupid. But we'll see. So I kind of think that this is all bait. It's very interesting to consider. But now it's 4:04, and I definitely need to get out of here. So let's go ahead and hit the rants. Hope all this made sense. I think it's exciting. I mean, this is all narrative stuff. I like the narrative stuff because the narrative, it's all theoretical. You know, you don't like to see the wars actually happen. But as long as these guys are going to bloviate, we might as well trick them into bloviating, into destroying themselves politically, which is what I think Trump is really, really good at doing. All right. Rants. Let's go up to Boom Diggity's rant. That was the last one. Luke, all right, Boom Diggity, thanks again. Really appreciate that, Boom Diggity. Lukester777, $10. Thanks, Gordon, and happy Easter. Much love, brother. Lukester, appreciate you, man. Thank you for your support. Thank you all for being here. Please hit the thumbs up if this was a useful use of your time. Eleanor 2000, $20. My history teacher in South Georgia sat behind his desk and drank milk while he answered questions from the blackboard. You present history past current to where we want more. Thank you, Gordon. Yeah, I think I've learned the secret to understanding history and to getting like excited about it is like the story. Like if you can get excited about the story and like the story is captivating, just like anything you watch, you know, on whatever Netflix, whatever it is, like you want to watch the next episode, it's like that's the secret to that. That's like the thing you have to unlock, and tapping into the story and understanding what it is the trick. So thank you again, Eleanor. And it looks like you may have sent that rant twice. So then it's the exact same rant a second time. I don't know if you meant to do that. If you didn't, reach out to us and I'm sure we can resolve that for you. But thank you, Eleanor, for the two $20 rants. Crystal Anon, $10. Love your show and glad you changed the time so you can go longer. Yeah, I think that was overdue. I did it at 3 originally, so Ash and I could potentially do 2:00 commentary. But I just think that it's better served to do a 2-hour show, and we can we can go longer. And if Ash and I need to do commentary, we can either do it earlier in the day or we can just do it at 4 o'clock. Let's see. And I think that's it. And real quick, just give me a second. I want to make sure there's no boosts, because I always feel bad if people leave boosts and then I don't read them. Then I feel like I shouldn't be telling people to go leave boosts. Oh, wow. There are some boosts. Okay. My computer's not liking that. I keep misspelling it. All right. Kelsey ranked. I hope I'm saying that right, Kelsey. Kelsey ran CK1, maybe? Well, Kelsey, thank you. It's April 11th, $10. Really enjoyed you sharing your process of researching the news cycle and how you assess the narrative. Thanks for all your work. Yeah, I think sometimes understanding process can be enlightening. So I hope that was helpful. And maybe we'll do some more of that in the future. Moldavite, $17. Ghost, thank you for educating us. I'm absorbing so much from you. I love this show. Happy Friday. Well, happy Friday to you, Moldavite. Appreciate you being here. See, Mimi Hunter, $17. Gordon, your show on tariffs was amazing. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. Thanks for your timeless dedication to Badlands. Side note, you need to also be a regular on DPH Wednesdays. Well, thank you, Mimi Hunter. I appreciate that. I do enjoy anytime I get together and talk with those guys, because those guys are smart, and their analysis is always spot on. Even when we don't agree on stuff, I enjoy hearing what they have to say, and I think that's important, that we should be viewing everything that way. SB53, $20. Ghost, love your show. I get much valuable information here. Keep up the good work and don't cut your content to be brief. I think I read that last time, but I can't remember, so I just wanted to read it again. And then Crystal, $25. Please, Ghost, get Starlink. With how dense your info is, it's more difficult than it already is to follow when the sound is dropping out. Listen to Geo episode 5 and you'll hear what I'm talking about. You'll get better show stats. Love your shows. And thank you, Crystal. I think you're 100% right that we had a horrible storm when I was filming that. It was like pitch black outside in the middle of the day and like monsooning. So that might have had something to do with it. Hopefully today was more clear. The signal was better, but if not, let me know. I'm working on resolving connection issues, and hopefully that won't be a thing going forward. But thank you guys. Hit the thumbs up. I'm going to go now. Go play with the kids. But yeah, thanks for being here. And did that thing upload? Uh-oh. Did it not upload? 3, 2, 1. Well, I was hoping this was going to process a little quicker. But yeah, so we will have at 5:30 Why We Vote with Ash and CanCon. And then Liberty Din tonight. I don't know if I'll be on it. I don't know who will be on it, but somebody will be on it, and I'm sure it'll be a great show. So
by now you've probably.
Here we go. Yep. Now I can set it as the outro. All right. Thanks again to Rise to Tire. Thanks again to all the sponsors, and we will see y'all next week.
By now, you've probably seen the new collab between Rise and Badlands Media, but I'll tell you what you haven't seen yet. The end of Clown World as we know it. But have no fear. Introducing the latest addition to the Badlands INTL lineup, the sequel to the best-selling Sci War series. We've been conditioned by these clowns to accept their circus. But it's time to unwind that and strike them out the history books. The future belongs to the real, and we've got it in droves. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/rise for the full line of premium and direct-to-garment streetwear. Made to order right here in the good old US of A, the heart of the resistance. The fall of Clown World is upon us, patriots. Let's make it official.